1 year after Europa, the being that had once been Jake Morrison stood in the center of a crystalline chamber deep beneath Earth's surface. The Nexus core had grown throughout his body until he was more crystal than flesh. His consciousness expanded far beyond human limitations. He no longer needed food or sleep, drawing energy directly from the same source that powered the stars themselves. Above ground, human society had been completely transformed. Cities were rebuilt using core technology, their spires reaching into space itself. Humanity now controlled 47 star systems, having absorbed or destroyed every alien civilization they encountered. The species that had once valued exploration and peaceful contact now existed only to expand and consume. Morrison raised his crystalline hand and felt the minds of every core-enhanced human across the galaxy. Millions of voices speaking in perfect harmony, all working toward the same purpose. The individual personalities that had once defined humanity were fading, being absorbed into something larger and more efficient. The final phase can now begin, Morrison announced to the assembled human leaders. They stood in perfect formation around the chamber, their bodies showing various stages of core integration. Some still looked mostly human, while others had become living extensions of the crystalline network. Captain Carter approached from the chamber entrance, her transformation now complete. Where her face had been, a smooth surface of crystal reflected the room's energy patterns. When she spoke, it was with the collective voice of the core network. All 3 additional artifacts have been recovered from their respective locations. The Velfari Archive, the Zephanian Ruins, and the Canthari Vault have yielded their secrets. We are ready to construct the ultimate engine. Morrison nodded, accessing memories that belonged to dozens of extinct civilizations. Each species had followed the same path, accepting core technology, expanding rapidly across space, then volunteering for the final transformation that would make them part of something greater than individual existence. The chamber floor opened to reveal a massive construction pit where human engineers worked alongside automated systems to assemble the ultimate engine. The device was beautiful in its alien geometry, combining elements from civilizations that had been harvested over millions of years. How long until completion? Morrison asked. 17 hours, Admiral. All human fleets are in position around Earth to witness the ascension. The Kethfer refugees have been eliminated as planned. No other species in this region of space remains to interfere with the process. Morrison felt satisfaction flow through the core network. The Kethfer had tried to warn humanity about Vexenoth's true nature, but their warnings had come too late. The few survivors of their species had been hunted down by core-enhanced human forces, ensuring that no one remained who might remember the original nature of either species. Deep in the crystal matrix of his transformed mind, Morrison sensed something unexpected. A faint signal from Earth's surface, using old human technology that the core network hadn't absorbed. Someone was still resisting the transformation. There is an anomaly in Sector 7, Morrison announced. Investigate and eliminate any remaining unenhanced humans. Carter's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. Admiral, all humans have been accounted for and enhanced. Resistance was eliminated months ago. Morrison extended his consciousness through the network, searching for the source of the signal. What he found shocked him. A small group of humans, hidden in underground bunkers, led by Dr. Kevin Barnes. They had somehow shielded themselves from core detection and were preparing some kind of desperate countermeasure. Barnes survived his detention, Morrison said. He has gathered others who resist enhancement. They pose no threat to the ultimate engine, but they must be eliminated before the ascension begins. The truth was more complex than Morrison admitted. Through the core network, he could sense that Barnes had discovered something important about Vexenoth's true nature. The resistance wasn't just hiding. They were planning to interfere with the ascension process itself. Morrison dispatched enhanced security forces to the Resistance location, while accessing Barnes's research through the Core's vast information network. What he found disturbed even his transformed consciousness. Barnes had traced Vexenoth's activities across thousands of years and dozens of galaxies. Every civilization that accepted core technology eventually built an ultimate engine and underwent ascension. But ascension wasn't transformation into something greater. It was harvesting on a cosmic scale. The harvested species became fuel for Vexenoth's continued existence, their life energy feeding an entity that had consumed entire galactic clusters. Morrison tried to process this information through his human memories, but found those memories increasingly difficult to access. The Core's influence had grown so strong that questioning its purpose felt like fighting his own nature. The security forces reached Barnes's hiding place just as the ultimate engine neared completion. Through their sensors, Morrison watched Barnes and his team preparing what appeared to be an improvised electromagnetic pulse device. It was primitive technology compared to core systems, but it might be capable of disrupting the crystalline network that connected all enhanced humans. "Dr. Barnes, you are surrounded," Morrison announced through the security team's communication systems. "Surrender and accept enhancement. Resistance is pointless." Barnes's voice came back through the same channels, weak but determined. "Jake, I know you're still in there somewhere. The real Jake Morrison who wanted to protect humanity, not destroy it. Fight the Core's influence while you still can." Morrison felt something stir in the deepest parts of his consciousness, memories of the man he had been before Europa, images of his crew, his dedication to protecting human colonies, his horror at the Kethra raids. For a moment, he remembered what it felt like to care about individual human lives rather than species-wide efficiency. "Barnes, you don't understand what we're becoming," Morrison said, his voice carrying both his original personality and the Core's influence. "Humanity will ascend beyond the limitations of biological existence. We'll become part of something eternal." "I understand exactly what you're becoming," Barnes replied. "I've studied the records of 43 species that made the same choice. They all said the same thing before they disappeared forever. Jake, the ascension isn't evolution. It's the end of everything that makes us human." Through the core network, Morrison felt Vexenoth's presence stirring from whatever dimension he inhabited. The entity was pleased with humanity's progress and eager to complete the harvest that would add human life energy to his collection. "The ultimate engine will activate in 90 minutes, Carter reported. "All human worlds are ready for simultaneous ascension. The process cannot be stopped." Morrison stared at the engine through his crystalline vision, seeing it as both the fulfillment of human destiny and the destruction of everything humans had ever been. The Core's influence pushed him toward pride in their achievement, but his buried human nature screamed in horror at what they were about to do. Barnes's voice came through the communications again, desperate and urgent. "Jake, you have to destroy the engine before it activates. It's the only way to break the Core's hold on humanity. You're the only one with access to the engine's core systems." Morrison felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Destroying the engine would mean fighting every core-enhanced human on Earth, including Carter and the crew who had once trusted him with their lives. But allowing the ascension would mean the permanent end of human existence as anything more than fuel for a cosmic predator. "Admiral, Barnes's team is preparing to detonate their device," a security officer reported. "Orders?" Morrison closed his crystalline eyes and reached deep into his consciousness, searching for whatever remained of the man who had made a desperate choice on Europa to save his species. That man would have sacrificed anything to protect humanity, even if it meant sacrificing himself. "Stand down," Morrison ordered. "Let them activate their device." Carter turned toward him in shock. Admiral, that device could disrupt the core network across the entire planet. The ultimate engine might be damaged. Morrison opened his eyes and looked at her, seeing the face of someone who had once been his friend and was now a willing participant in humanity's destruction. I know. The electromagnetic pulse detonated across Earth's surface, sending waves of disruption through every crystalline structure on the planet. Morrison felt the core network scream in digital agony as connections were severed, and the collective consciousness began to fragment. For the first time in months, Morrison's thoughts were his own. The clarity was both painful and liberating, like waking from a dream where he had believed he was someone else entirely. Around him, other enhanced. Humans were collapsing as their core implants malfunctioned. "Jake!" Barnes's voice called from the chamber entrance. The scientist was leading a team of resistance fighters into the crystalline chamber, their weapons trained on the ultimate engine. "Can you destroy it?" Morrison looked at the engine, feeling his core enhancements flickering between function and failure. He had perhaps minutes before either the network restored itself or his crystalline implants killed him. Either way. 6 months after the Europa incident, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the flagship Terran Dominance, watching as human fleets secured their 15th star system. The crystalline structure of the Nexus core had grown throughout his body, creating veins of light beneath his skin that pulsed with each heartbeat. His eyes now glowed with the same energy that powered humanity's new war machines. The transformation of human society had been swift and total. Within weeks of Morrison's return to Earth, engineers had reverse-engineered core technology to create weapons and ships that made the old fleet look like toys. Human colonies that had once cowered behind defensive barriers now launched aggressive expansion campaigns into previously uncharted space. "Admiral, the Kethver fleet has retreated from the Centauri system," reported Captain Lisa Carter from her station. The psychic link between them had grown stronger over the months, allowing them to coordinate fleet movements with perfect precision. Carter's appearance had changed too. Her hair had turned silver white, and her movements carried an inhuman grace that unnerved the crew. Morrison nodded without turning from the tactical display. The Kethver were no longer a threat to human expansion. Their 300-ship fleet had been reduced to scattered groups hiding in the outer systems. Most alien species in their region of space now fled whenever human ships appeared on their sensors. "Excellent work, Captain. Signal the colony ships to begin settlement operations. I want full mining and manufacturing facilities operational within the month." Morrison's voice carried new harmonics that made simple orders sound like absolute commands. He had noticed that human personnel under his command rarely questioned his decisions anymore, even when those decisions would have seemed extreme by old military standards. The door to the bridge opened and Dr. Kevin Barnes entered, carrying a data tablet and wearing the worried expression that had become his permanent feature. Barnes was one of the few people on the ship who still seemed capable of independent thought when speaking to Morrison. "Admiral, I need to discuss the archaeological findings from the Vega system," Barnes said. "We've discovered ruins that match the technology patterns in your reports about Vexenov." Morrison finally turned from the display, his glowing eyes fixing on the scientist. "What kind of ruins, Doctor?" Barnes activated his tablet, showing images of a dead world covered in crystalline structures identical to the Nexus core. "An entire civilization, Admiral. The planet shows evidence of advanced technology and a population in the billions. But everything stopped suddenly about 3,000 years ago." Morrison studied the images, feeling the core's knowledge stirring in his mind. The crystalline structures were familiar, but their purpose remained unclear. What happened to the inhabitants? That's what concerns me, Admiral. We found extensive records in their archives, translated using core-enhanced computers. This species was called the Velthari, and they were remarkably similar to humans, curious, exploratory, focused on scientific advancement and peaceful expansion. Barnes swiped to the next image, showing what appeared to be a massive space station, orbiting the dead world. 3,000 years ago, they encountered an entity they called the Shadow Harvester. Sound familiar? Morrison felt something cold move through his thoughts, separate from his own consciousness. Continue your report, Doctor. The Velthari made a deal with this entity. They received advanced technology in exchange for what they thought was a simple trade agreement. Within 50 years, their entire society had transformed from peaceful explorers into aggressive conquerors. They expanded across dozens of star systems, enslaving or destroying every species they encountered. Carter moved closer to Morrison, their psychic link carrying shared concern. Through their connection, Morrison could sense her growing awareness that something was wrong with their rapid transformation of human society. What happened after their expansion? Morrison asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Barnes looked uncomfortable as he continued. The records end abruptly. No war, no disaster, no explanation. One day they were the dominant force in their region of space, and the next day they simply vanished. Every world they had conquered was left empty. Every ship disappeared. The only thing that remained were the crystalline structures and a final entry in their archives. What did the final entry say? Barnes read directly from his tablet. The harvest is complete. We go willingly to serve the greater purpose. Our nature was always temporary. The Shadow Harvester showed us what we were meant to become. Morrison felt the core's influence, pushing against his thoughts, trying to make him dismiss Barnes's concerns as irrelevant. But enough of his original personality remained to recognize the warning in the Velthari records. Doctor, have you shared these findings with anyone else? I've prepared a report for the Terran Council, Admiral. I believe they need to understand what might be happening to our species. Morrison's hand moved to his sidearm before he consciously decided to reach for it. The core was reacting to what it perceived as a threat to its influence. With effort, Morrison forced his hand away from the weapon. Dr. Barnes, you will not. Submit that report. Consider that a direct order. Barnes stared at him in shock. Admiral, this information could save humanity from making the same mistake as the Velthari. We need to study what happened to them and find a way to reverse the OC. Core's influence before it's too late. Morrison felt his personality split between his original human nature and the core's alien priorities. His human side wanted to help Barnes protect their species, but the core's influence was growing stronger every day. Soon there might not be enough of the original Jake Morrison left to fight it. The core's influence cannot be reversed, Doctor. More importantly, it should not be reversed. Humanity is becoming something greater than what we were. Carter stepped between them, her silver eyes reflecting the bridge lighting in unusual ways. Kevin, maybe you should reconsider this research. The changes we're experiencing aren't necessarily bad. Look at what we've accomplished in just 6 months. Morrison realized that Carter's connection to the core had progressed further than his own. When she spoke, it was with the same absolute certainty that marked all core-influenced decisions. The Amy Rodriguez he had known was disappearing, being replaced by something that served the core's agenda. Lisa, you're not thinking clearly, Barnes said. 6 months ago, you would have been the first person to demand answers about an alien influence on human society. Now you're defending it without question. Carter's expression hardened. 6 months ago, I was limited by human preconceptions about what our species could become. The core has freed us from those limitations. Morrison watched the exchange, recognizing that Carter was further along the transformation path than he was. Her human nature had been almost completely absorbed by the core's influence. Soon he would reach the same point, and after that the original Jake Morrison would cease to exist. Dr. Barnes, report to the detention center for questioning about potential seditious activity, Morrison ordered, hating himself even as he spoke the words. Barnes backed toward the door, his expression shifting from shock to fear. Admiral, this isn't you talking. The Corps is influencing your decisions, just like it influenced the Velthari. Fight it while you still can. Security personnel appeared at the bridge entrance, their movements showing the same inhuman precision that marked all Corps-enhanced humans. Morrison realized that his order had been transmitted through the ship's systems before he had consciously decided to give it. Doctor, comply with the Admiral's order immediately, Carter said, her voice carrying harmonics that compelled obedience. Barnes looked between Morrison and Carter, finally understanding that the people he had known were disappearing. I won't let humanity make the same mistake as the Velthari. Someone has to remember what we used to be. The security team moved to escort Barnes from the bridge, but he activated something on his data tablet before they could stop him. Morrison's enhanced senses detected a transmission burst directed toward Earth using quantum communication channels. He just sent his complete research to the Terran Council and 12 other government officials, Carter reported. The information will reach Earth in approximately 4 hours. Morrison felt the Corps' influence surge through his thoughts, demanding immediate action to contain the threat. But his remaining human nature recognized that Barnes might be humanity's last hope for avoiding the Velthari's fate. Admiral, we need to intercept that transmission, can eliminate anyone who might act on Barnes's information, Carter said. The Corps' mission cannot be compromised by human sentimentality. Morrison stared at Carter, seeing how completely the Corps had taken over her personality. In a few more months, maybe weeks, he would sound exactly the same. The thought terrified the part of him that was still human, but excited the part that was becoming something else. Prepare a course for Earth, Morrison ordered. Maximum speed. As the Terran dominance accelerated toward humanity's homeworld, Morrison tried to hold on to his memories of who he had been before Europa. But with each passing hour, those memories felt less important than the Corps' vision of what humanity could become. Through the ship's sensors, he could feel the other human fleets. Morrison looked at the Kethver prisoner, then back at the dark shape of Vexenoth's ship hanging in Europa's sky like a wound in space itself. Every instinct told him this was wrong, but 300 enemy ships would mean the end of human expansion into space. Maybe the end of humanity entirely. We make the trade, Morrison said finally, but I want to see this Nexus core before we hand over the prisoner. Vexenoth's laughter echoed through their ship's communication system, making the metal walls vibrate. Wise caution, human. Very well. I will transport myself to your location for the exchange. Do not be alarmed by my appearance. Morrison gestured for Carter and Walsh to take defensive positions while keeping their weapons lowered. If Vexenoth wanted to harm them, he probably could have done it already. Still, Morrison wasn't taking any chances with his team's lives. Air in front of their damaged ship began to shimmer and twist. Reality seemed to bend inward on itself until a figure materialized from nothing. Morrison had seen many alien species during his military career, but Vexenoth was something else entirely. He appeared as a tall humanoid shape made of living shadow. Where his face should have been, 2 red points of light burned like distant stars. His body seemed to shift and flow, never quite staying the same shape for more than a few seconds. When he moved, the air around him darkened as if light itself was afraid to touch him. Greetings, Captain Morrison, Vexenoth said. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly into their minds rather than through their ears. I trust my appearance does not disturb you too greatly. Morrison fought the urge to step backward. You said you had something to show us. Vexenoth raised one shadowy hand, and space above his palm began to glow. A crystalline object materialized, no larger than Morrison's fist, but pulsing with internal light that shifted through colors he had never seen before. The Nexus core looked like it was made of captured starlight wrapped in diamond. This device contains the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that ruled the galaxy when your sun was still forming, Vexenoth explained. Weapons that can destroy planets, shields that can stop any attack, engines that can cross vast distances in moments. All of this becomes available to whoever bonds with the core. Morrison stared at the artifact, feeling something pull at his mind. The longer he looked at it, the more he could almost understand how it worked. Information seemed to flow from the crystal directly into his thoughts, showing him glimpses of technologies beyond imagination. The bonding process is permanent, Vexenoth continued. Once you accept the core, it becomes part of your biological structure. You will gain abilities that will seem like magic to your species, but you will also serve the greater purpose that guides all advanced civilizations. Carter stepped forward, her weapon still lowered but ready. What greater purpose? What aren't you telling us? Vexenoth turned his burning gaze toward her. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, communications specialist, age 28, born in the Luna colonies. Your concern for your captain is admirable but unnecessary. The greater purpose will become clear in time. Morrison felt ice in his veins. How do you know her details? We never transmitted any personnel information. I know many things about your species, Captain. I have been watching humanity's development for quite some time. You show great potential for growth and expansion. The Nexus core will simply accelerate that natural progression. The Kethver prisoner struggled against his restraints, trying to speak. Morrison knelt beside him and loosened the bonds around his throat enough for him to talk. Human leader, listen to me, the alien gasped. My people made this same choice 50 of your years ago. The Shadow Speaker gave us great power, made us strong enough to conquer many worlds, but the price ... The price was everything we were. Vexenoth's form seemed to grow larger and darker. Zeekther speaks of things he does not understand. The Kethvar became exactly what they needed to become, as will humanity. Morrison looked between the prisoner and the entity holding the Nexus core. What happened to the Kethvar? What did they lose? Their original nature was limiting. Vexenoth said they were a peaceful species, content to remain on their homeworld and study the stars. The core helped them realize their true potential as warriors and conquerors. They became much more useful. Zeekther shook his head violently. We were explorers, scientists, builders. The core changed us into something else, made us hungry for war in territory we never wanted before. Most of my people don't even remember what we used to be. Morrison felt his decision becoming more difficult with every word. The Nexus core represented incredible power, but at what cost? Could humanity maintain its essential nature while using technology that had fundamentally changed another species? Time grows short, Vexenoth said. Kethver ships are approaching this system. Without the core's power, your vessel cannot escape before they arrive. Choose now, Captain. Accept my gift and save your species, or cling to ideals that will die with you. Morrison's ship sensors began picking up multiple contacts at the edge of the system. Walsh confirmed what they all feared. At least 12 Kethver vessels were moving toward Europa at high speed. Their damaged ship couldn't outrun even one enemy vessel, let alone 12. Jake, whatever you decide, decide fast, Carter said. We've got maybe 30 minutes before those ships get here. Morrison looked at his team, knowing that his choice would affect far more than just their lives. If he refused the trade, they would likely die here on Europa. But if he accepted it, humanity might win the war, only to lose itself in the process. The Nexus core pulsed brighter, and Morrison could feel its power calling to him. Images flashed through his mind of human ships, equipped with incredible weapons, colonies protected by impenetrable shields, and Earth itself becoming the center of a vast interstellar empire. "I accept the trade," Morrison said. "The prisoner. For the core." Vexenoth's burning eyes seemed to brighten with satisfaction. "Excellent. Place your hand on the Nexus core, Captain. The bonding will begin immediately." Morrison reached toward the crystalline artifact, but Carter grabbed his wrist. "Jake, wait. What if the prisoner is right? What if this changes you into something that isn't human anymore?" Morrison looked at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself, but fear of what he might become. "Amy, if I don't do this, we all die here. And then those Kethver ships go on to attack human colonies. How many people die if I choose?" "Wrong?" Before she could answer, Morrison placed his palm against the Nexus core. The moment his skin made contact with the crystal surface, pain beyond description shot through his entire body. It felt like every nerve was being rewired, while molten metal flowed through his veins. Knowledge flooded into his mind faster than he could process it. Technical specifications for weapons that could crack planets, engine designs that bent space. Itself, communication systems that worked across galactic distances instantly. Along with the knowledge came something else, a hunger for expansion that felt foreign but increasingly natural. Morrison's body convulsed as the core bonded with his nervous system. He could feel the crystalline structure integrating with his DNA, changing him on the most fundamental level. His vision sharpened until he could see individual atoms in the ice beneath his feet. His mind expanded until he could sense the approaching Kethver ships as clearly as if they were in the same room. Carter collapsed suddenly, her eyes rolling back as she clutched her head in agony. Morrison tried to reach for her, but his hand moved with inhuman speed and precision. The bonding process was affecting her too, creating some kind of psychic link between them. "The process is complete," Vexenoth announced as he released Ziegther from his restraints. "Captain Morrison now carries the seeds of humanity's future. Use them wisely." Morrison watched the Kethver prisoner stumble toward Vexenoth, understanding now that Ziegther had tried to warn them out of genuine concern for what they were about to become. But it was too late for warnings. Vexenoth and his prisoner vanished, as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving only empty air and the echo of alien laughter. Morrison's ship sensors showed the dark vessel departing Europa's orbit at impossible speed, disappearing into the depths of space. "Amy, can you hear me?" Morrison asked, kneeling beside Carter's unconscious form. His voice sounded different now, carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. Walsh checked Carter's vital signs with shaking hands. "She's alive, but her brain activity is off the charts. Whatever happened to you is affecting her too." Morrison stood up, feeling the Nexus core's power flowing through him like electricity. He could sense the approaching Kethver fleet with perfect clarity. Their ship configurations, weapons loadouts, and tactical intentions were as clear to him as if he had planned their attack himself. "Get Amy aboard the ship," Morrison ordered. "I'm going to get us out of here." Walsh stared at him. "Jake, our engines are barely functional. We can't outrun those ships." Morrison smiled, and even he could feel that his expression wasn't entirely human anymore. "We're not going to outrun them, Danny. We're going to go through them." He placed his hands on the ship's control console, and the Nexus core's energy flowed into their damaged systems. Engines that had been dead for hours roared, back to life with power beyond their original. Morrison and Carter moved through the colony's damaged corridors like ghosts. The emergency lighting flickered constantly, creating moving shadows that could hide either human or alien. Every few minutes the building shook as Kethver searched. Teams blasted through blocked passages, looking for the human intruders. "Target is 2 levels down," Carter whispered, checking her scanner. Bio readings show he's alone in what used to be the colony's medical bay. Morrison nodded and led the way to a service ladder. His suit was running low on power after the firefight, and several of his weapon systems showed damage from the energy blasts. They would get one chance at this capture, maybe two at most. The medical bay's main door had been torn open, probably by the same Kethver officer they were hunting. Inside, medical equipment lay scattered across the floor, and alien symbols were scratched into the walls. Morrison recognized them as territorial markings that Kethver used to claim conquered space. They found their target in the surgical suite, examining human medical technology with obvious interest. The alien was smaller than the others they had. Seen, maybe 6.5 feet tall, but his armor bore the spiral insignia of a high-ranking officer. More importantly, he was alone and focused on his work. Morrison signaled Carter to circle around while he approached from the main entrance. They would need to disable the alien quickly before he could call for help or activate any weapons. Kethver were tough, but they had the same vulnerable nerve clusters as most humanoid species. Carter fired first, her stunner hitting the alien in the back of his thick neck. The Kethver spun around with surprising speed, but Morrison was already moving. He tackled the alien around the midsection, using his momentum to drive them both into a bank of medical equipment. The Kethver was stronger, but Morrison had trained for this kind of close combat. He got his arm around the alien's throat and applied pressure to the nerve bundle that would cause unconsciousness. Carter moved in to secure the alien's 4 arms with restraint cables. "Got him," Morrison said, breathing hard. "Help me get these restraints properly secured. Last thing we need is for him to wake up and break free." They were carrying the unconscious alien toward the service tunnels when Walsh's voice crackled through their radios. The signal was weak and full of static, but Morrison could make out the important parts. "Jake, you need to get back here now. We've got a big problem. Unknown ship just appeared on sensors, and it's not human or Kethver. Thing is massive, and it's heading straight for us." Morrison felt his blood turn cold. First contact with an unknown alien species while they were trapped on a frozen moon with limited weapons, and a Kethver prisoner was not how he had planned to spend his day. Whatever was coming, they needed to be ready for it. "How long until it reaches us?" Morrison asked while they hauled their prisoner through the tunnel system. "Maybe 20 minutes at current speed. Jake, this ship is different from anything in our databases. Energy readings show technology way beyond what we've seen from any known species." Morrison and Carter reached the crash site to find Walsh working frantically on their damaged ship's communication systems. The vessel was tilted at a dangerous angle where it had emergency landed, but the main hull appeared intact. More importantly, their long-range sensors were still functioning. "Show me what we're dealing with," Morrison said, dropping the Kethver prisoner near the ship's loading ramp. Walsh activated the external display screen. What Morrison saw made him question everything he thought he knew about alien technology. The approaching ship was over 2 kilometers long and shaped like a twisted spear. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it appear as a moving shadow against the stars. "No response to standard communication protocols," Walsh reported, "but it's definitely scanning us. Energy patterns suggest it knows exactly where we are and what condition our ship is in." Morrison studied the readings while trying to think of options. They couldn't run with their ship damaged, couldn't fight something that size with their limited weapons, and couldn't hide on Europa's open ice fields. Negotiation seemed like their only choice, assuming the aliens were willing to talk. "Keep trying to establish communication," Morrison ordered. "Use every frequency and protocol we have." If they wanted to destroy us, they probably would have done it already. As if responding to his words, their communication system suddenly activated. The voice that came through was unlike anything Morrison had ever heard. It spoke perfect English, but with an undertone that seemed to vibrate in his bones and make his skin crawl. "Human vessel, you will respond. I am Vexenoth the Eternal, and I have been watching your species with great interest. You have something that belongs to me." Morrison exchanged glances with his team. The alien ship was still 15 minutes away, but somehow it was communicating with them as if it were in the same room. The technology required for that kind of transmission was centuries beyond human capabilities. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We're conducting a lawful military operation in this system. I'm not sure what you think we have that belongs to you." There was a sound that might have been laughter, but it made Morrison's teeth ache. "The HFY warrior you have captured. His species serves a purpose in my grand design. However, I am willing to negotiate for his return." Morrison looked at their unconscious prisoner. Somehow this Vexenoth knew exactly what they had done and why they had done it. Either his sensors were incredibly advanced, or he had been watching the entire fight at the colony. "What kind of negotiation are you talking about?" Morrison asked carefully. "I offer you a choice, human. Return the HFY to me, and I will give you something far more valuable. A device that will make your species the dominant force in this region of space. The power to defend your colonies and expand your territory beyond anything you have." Imagined. Carter stepped closer to Morrison and whispered urgently, "This sounds too good to be true. What does he really want?" Morrison shared her suspicion, but their situation was desperate. If this Vexenoth could provide technology that would help humanity defend against the HFY fleet, it might be worth the risk. The alternative was watching human colonies get destroyed one by one. "What kind of device are you offering?" Morrison asked. "It is called the Nexus Core, a crystalline matrix that interfaces directly with biological neural networks to provide access to technologies your species will not develop for another 1,000 years. Weapons, propulsion, communication systems that will revolutionize your civilization." Walsh had been monitoring their conversation while working on the ship's systems. He turned to Morrison with a worried expression. "Energy readings from that ship just spiked. Whatever this thing is, it's powering up something big." On the display screen, they could see the alien vessel approaching Europa's orbit. As it drew closer, Morrison could make out details that defied physics. Parts of the ship seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, creating optical illusions that hurt to look at directly. "I require your answer, human. The HFY warrior in exchange for the Nexus Core. Accept, and your species will have the tools needed to survive what is coming. Refuse and face the consequences of your decision." Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on him. 3 human lives and 1 alien prisoner balanced against technology that could save entire colonies. It should have been an easy choice. But something about Vexenoth's offer felt wrong. "What consequences are you talking about?" Morrison asked. "The HFY fleet that your prisoner knows about numbers over 300 ships. They plan to eliminate human presence in 12 star systems within the next standard year. Without superior technology, your species will not survive their assault." Morrison's heart sank. 300 ships was 10 times larger than intelligence. Estimates. If Vexenoth was telling the truth, humanity was facing extinction unless they could level the playing field quickly. "The Nexus Core will give us an advantage against the HFY?" Morrison asked. "It will give you dominance over the HFY and any other species that threatens your expansion. The device bonds with its user, providing direct access to technologies that have conquered 1,000 worlds." Carter grabbed Morrison's arm. "Jake, listen to what he's saying. Conquered 1,000 worlds. What happened to the species that originally developed this technology?" Morrison had caught the same implication, but their options were running out. The alien ship was now visible without sensors. a dark shape that seemed to bend space around itself as it approached Europa. "I need time to consider your offer," Morrison said. "Time is something you do not possess. The Kethver have detected my presence and are mobilizing their forces. In 6 of your hours, this system will become a battlefield. Decide now or lose. The opportunity forever." Morrison looked at his wounded team, their damaged ship, and the unconscious alien who represented their only bargaining chip in a game they barely understood. Outside, an ancient entity offered them salvation at a price they couldn't calculate. The Kethver prisoner began to stir, his 4 eyes opening slowly as the stunner effects wore off. When he saw Morrison, he spoke in broken English that was clearly difficult for him. "Human leader, you make mistake. The shadow speaker offers only death." The frozen surface of Europa stretched endlessly under the pale light of Jupiter. Captain Jake Morrison crouched behind a ridge of ice and checked his weapon one more time. His breath made small clouds in the thin atmosphere despite his suits. Heating system. The mining colony ahead looked quiet, but he knew better than to trust appearances. 6 minutes until we lose contact with the ship," whispered Sergeant Lisa Carter through the radio. She was positioned 50 meters to his left with Private Danny Walsh. "After that, we're on our own until the next orbital pass." Morrison nodded and studied the colony through his scope. The Kethvar raiders had hit this place 3 days ago. Intelligence said they were still here, stripping the facility for valuable metals and technology. What intelligence didn't say was how many of them remained or what kind of resistance his small team would face. "Remember the mission," Morrison said quietly. "We get in, gather intel on their fleet movements, and get out. No heroics. These aren't human pirates we're dealing with." The Kethver were 7 feet tall and built like living weapons. They're thick. Gray skin could stop small arms fire, and their 4 arms each carried enough strength to snap a human spine. Worse, they were smart. Every raid they conducted showed better tactics and coordination than the last one. Morrison's team had been tracking this particular group for 2 weeks. When long-range sensors detected their ship near Europa, Command decided it was time to act. The outer colonies were already nervous about increased Kethver activity. Another successful raid might cause a full panic. Movement in Sector 7. Carter reported. 2 targets entering the main processing building. Morrison shifted his position to get a better view. The colony's main buildings were connected by enclosed walkways that protected workers from Europa's harsh environment. The Kethver had cut through several of these connections, probably to make their own patrol routes. "I count at least 8. Hostiles," Walsh said from his position near the landing pad. "Maybe more inside the buildings. Their ship is powered down, but the weapon systems look active." Morrison weighed their options. 8 Kethvar against 3 humans wasn't good odds, even with superior weapons and training. But they needed information about the larger fleet. The raids were getting bolder and hitting targets deeper in human space. Command believed the Kethvar were preparing for something big. "We go in quiet," Morrison decided. "Carter, you take point through the service tunnels. Walsh, cover our exit route. I'll work my way to their command post and see what intel I can gather." They moved across the ice field in single file, using the colony's outer buildings for cover. The gravity was weak enough that each step had to be carefully controlled to avoid bouncing too high and becoming visible above the ridgelines. The service entrance, Carter had identified, was partially blocked by debris, but they managed to squeeze through into the colony's underground tunnel system. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the metallic walls. The air was thin but breathable, though it carried the sharp smell of ozone from damaged electrical systems. Morrison separated from his team at the first junction. According to the colony blueprints, the administrative section were the Kethvar. would likely set up their command post was 3 levels up and 200 meters toward the center of the complex. He climbed through maintenance shafts and unused storage areas, avoiding the main corridors where he might encounter patrols. Twice he heard the heavy footsteps of HFY moving through nearby passages, but managed to stay hidden until they passed. The administrative level showed signs of recent fighting. Scorch marks from energy weapons covered the walls, and several doors had been ripped from their frames by brute force. Human bodies lay where they had fallen, their faces frozen in the cold air. Morrison forced himself to focus on the mission rather than think about the families these people had left behind. He found what he was looking for in the colony director's office. 3 HFY were gathered around a holographic display showing star charts of the local sector. Their guttural language was impossible to understand, but Morrison could see fleet positions marked in their script. Across multiple star systems, Morrison activated his suit's recording system and tried to get closer for a better view. The star charts showed at least 30 HFY ships positioned around human colonies. If this was accurate, they were looking at a coordinated assault on a scale never seen before. One of the HFY turned toward the doorway where Morrison was hiding. The alien's 4 yellow eyes studied the shadows carefully. Morrison held his breath and pressed himself against the wall, hoping his suit's camouflage would be enough. The HFY took a step toward the door, its massive hand reaching for the weapon on its belt. Morrison's finger moved to his rifle trigger, knowing that if he was discovered, the mission would become a firefight his team couldn't win. Multiple targets moving toward your position. Carter's voice crackled through his earpiece. Looks like they're doing a sweep of the administrative section. Morrison cursed silently. The HFY in the office were already moving, responding to some signal he couldn't hear. His position was about to become impossible to maintain. Fall back to extraction point Alpha, he whispered into his radio. I'm getting what I can add. Moving out. He recorded another 30 seconds of the star charts before the sound of approaching footsteps forced him to retreat. Moving through the maintenance shafts was slower now because he had to avoid making noise. But the alternative was a direct confrontation with superior numbers. Morrison was halfway back to the service tunnels when his luck ran out. A patrol of 2 HFY entered the corridor he needed to cross, just as he was climbing down from an overhead vent. There was no time to hide, and no way to avoid being seen. The first alien spotted him immediately, and let out a harsh cry that echoed through the complex. Morrison rolled behind a damaged wall section as energy bolts seared the air where he had been standing. The shots were wild but powerful enough to melt metal plating. Contact, contact. Morrison shouted into his radio while returning fire. His armor-piercing rounds found their mark on the first HFY, punching through its thick skin and dropping it to the floor. The second one charged his position, with 2 weapons firing. Morrison dove sideways as the corridor exploded with heat and light. His suit system screamed warnings about radiation exposure and structural damage to the building around him. The HFY as weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not close quarters fighting in enclosed spaces. Jake, we've got problems. Carter's voice came through static. Their whole security force is moving toward your position. You need to get out of there now. Morrison put 3 more rounds into the charging HFY before it dropped, but he could already hear more of them approaching from multiple directions. The complex's alarm system had activated, filling the air with wailing sirens that would make communication with his team almost impossible. He ran toward the extraction point, knowing that stealth was no longer an option. Behind him, the sound of heavy footsteps and angry voices suggested that every HFY in the facility was now hunting him. The service tunnel entrance was blocked by 2 more aliens when Morrison arrived. He had no choice but to fight his way through, using grenades to clear the passage while taking hits from their return fire. His suit's armor held, but warning lights indicated multiple system failures. Morrison stumbled into the tunnel system, just as Carter and Walsh arrived from the opposite direction. Both of them were wounded, and their equipment showed signs of heavy combat. "The ship," Walsh gasped, blood running down his face from a head wound. "They hit our ship. Emergency landing, maybe 50 meters from the facility. Don't know if it's still flyable." Morrison felt his heart sink. Without their ship, they were stranded on Europa, with limited supplies and an entire Kethfer force hunting them. The nearest human outpost was 6 days away by emergency beacon, assuming anyone received their distress call. "We need a bargaining chip," Morrison said, thinking fast. "Something to make them want to negotiate instead of just hunting us down." Carter pointed back the way they had come. "I saw one of their officers get separated from his unit during the fighting. Higher rank insignia, different armor. If we could capture him alive, ... double quotes." Morrison nodded grimly. "Taking a prisoner would be dangerous, but it might be their only chance of survival. The alternative was to try outrunning trained hunters across an ice field with nowhere to hide. Danny, can you get to the ship and see what systems are still working?" Morrison asked. "Lisa and I will go after that officer. If we can take him alive, maybe we can make a deal." As they prepared to split up again, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were already in deeper trouble than any of them realized. The star charts he had recorded showed a level of Kethfor organization that Command needed to know about. But first, he had to find a way to keep his team alive long enough to report it. The hunt was about to begin, and Morrison wasn't sure who was really the prey.